Hi, everybody. Welcome to Domain Sherpa. Today we have a new segment called SherpaShorts, which is co-hosted by Chris Zuiker and Matthew Zuiker and myself, where we pick one topic or question and we try to dig into it for a bit, but shorter than our typical long-form shows that we do. We know people these days have short attention spans, so this piggybacks off of some of the blogs that Chris currently posts to LinkedIn and YouTube, providing useful insight to the audience about domaining, valuations, negotiations, and other related topics. Also, if you're not following him or connected with him already, make sure you do that. One of the best in the biz, so you definitely don't want to miss all that great information. And then on today's show specifically, we're going to talk about how to determine the right price for your domain so you don't turn off potential buyers, partners, but also don't leave money on the table. So the question is, how do you get to that sweet spot? So that's what we talk about today. And remember, if you're listening to the audio version of this podcast, you can also watch the video version at DomainSherpa.com and on our YouTube channel at ds.tv. We now have all the past episodes there, so you can dig into the largest library of domain-related podcast content in the world for free. You can also check us out on Apple and Spotify and other podcast platforms as well. We've also recently integrated with Muse.ai, so you can get transcripts and do new search functionality that didn't exist previously. So all good stuff. So definitely make sure that you check that out. And then on YouTube and everywhere else that you find us and you listen or you watch, make sure you subscribe, make sure you like, all that good stuff. We appreciate it. And as usual, big shout out to Dan.com, the #1 place in the world to buy and sell your domains, with a special platform made for domain investors. Yeah. So with all that, it's now time to get into this segment of Sherpa Shorts here on Domain Sherpa, where all roads lead to domains. What's up, Sherpa Network? Thank you for tuning in today. My name is Jonathan Tenenbaum, a.k.a. JT, a.k.a. Jay On, a.k.a. Sherpa Winfrey, and I'm the host and producer of Domain Sherpa, where all roads lead to domains. So we always try to do some new things on Sherpa. One thing that we're going to try to do today is we're going to do a little shorter segment than usual. Maybe call this thing Sherpa Shorts, Sherpa Snacks, Sherpa Snaps. I don't know. You know, we could take it in any direction. We'll see. But I've got my boy Chris Zuiker and Matthew Zuiker with me, my co-hosts on this little segment. What we're going to do is we're going to keep this to probably about 15 minutes, break into a really specific topic, question, story kind of thing, because people ask us questions all the time about different things in and around the domain space and how they manage the negotiation, the sales, the different things that they do with their domains. And it's tough for us to always answer every question that we get via email or work with everybody that potentially wants to work with us. So this is a great way for us to share, and it's also nice to be able to do it in a more targeted way than try to bury it in one of the longer shows that we do, which obviously is a big part of the programming here on Sherpas. So I'll go through real quick with my introductions. I'll keep that short as well, and then we'll dive right into the meat of it. So over to my right, I got my boy Matthew Zuiker, aka the Kid, aka Zyke1, aka Matlock, the first of his name. What's happening, man? He is our junior broker and has really cut his teeth under. I guess it's tough if I introduce Matthew before I introduce Chris. But Matthew, what's happening, man? Welcome to the show. What's up?
Happy to be here. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Excited to do this first kind of shorter segment, and hopefully we'll be doing a lot more of these.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. So last but certainly not least, below me, I got my boy, Chris Zuiker, aka Zuiker's Island, aka World War Z, aka the Brand Whisperer, aka Zuiker Jordan. Kind of sounds like Michael Jordan, you know what I'm saying? He is that dude. Talk about cutting your teeth, you've really come up under Drew as the, arguably the 1B best domain broker in the entire world. Don't tell Drew, but that delta keeps getting smaller and smaller, man, as time goes on. But anyway, we're all with MediaOptions, the #1 domain broker in the world, which y'all probably already know. But if you don't get to MediaOptions.com, check us out or just Google us. We're not hard to find. But yeah, so like I said, we do these long form shows all the time with our Domain Sherpa Review, our Down the Rabbit Hole series and things, but this is something we're going to do to try to sort of be a little bit more quick hitting. If anyone who doesn't follow Chris on LinkedIn, I suggest you do that. He blogs all the time with some really great insight into domaining, branding, domain negotiation, all of that kind of stuff. And that was actually what kind of brought this on, because we were saying, hey, it'd be great to do a shorter segment with on Sherpa and kind of addressing some of these real targeted pieces of information. So, but Chris, first of all, how you doing, man? How's everything?
Boom, 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 boom. All is good. I think it's going to be a good conversation, good shorts, and really like it. This thought came about. Obviously, I'm doing it already right now on LinkedIn, YouTube. I'm getting on the YouTube Shorts. As they're not the best, but listen, it's just about consistent communication on the value and education of domain names, and we have a lot of stories. I mean, just a lot of stories of people doing things right, people doing things wrong. Framing of domain names. How do you sell it? JD, to your point, how do you negotiate it? How do you get on the radar? What are the what are some pitfalls to avoid? And that's really like, we're in our team meeting Monday, and JT had this store, and we're like, let's just do a video on this real quick, right? The store, because it's not a unique story. It's a story we've heard over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, yeah. So with that, let me dive right into it. I mean, so, the names have been changed to protect the innocent and all that good stuff, but really,
but you're all guilty, man. They're all guilty. Everyone's guilty. This week, right? You're all guilty.
And look, and it's not a secret that we are the #1 domain broker in the world. Go to escrow.com, master domains, go back year after year after year, you'll see us at the top. So we're very selective with the clients that we work with. We do better outbound than anybody, but it's not an easy process. It's very involved. It's time consuming. You guys have done a fantastic job of building up the process around that, both the tech and the and the actual man hours that go into it, right? So we are selective about the names that we take under brokerage. We get inquiries literally every single day for people that want us to sell their domains for them. As much as we would love to be able to work with everybody, we just we can't, right? So we're really more about quality than quantity. And one of the things that happens, is somebody will reach out with a good domain. And then the question comes down to, okay, well, what is your expectation around value, right? Like, what do you think that you want to sell this domain for? And, recently we had a really great name, great guy who, we wanted to work with, and then when we got into the value piece, though, their price was just crazy high, right? And
another galaxy.
Another galaxy altogether.
Far away.
Yeah, and look, we believe that we're experts in domain valuation. Andrew did the developed the Rosner equation, which was baked into the Domain Academy and all this kind of stuff. So he's appeared in court, as an expert witness and expert testimony. So and it's based on a formula that is quantitative, qualitative, right? Objective, subjective. We talk about it a lot. You can go through some of the Domain Sherpa shows, check out the transcripts that we're doing through Muse. You can even search and find some of those moments and clips to see, and we can get into that and specifics in another show. But, so we have an idea of what we believe a domain is worth. And, once we hone in on it and spend the time to really get a sense of what we think it's worth, then, that's where we are. And we're not the only broker in town, right? There's a lot of qualified people out there. We are the best. We believe that. And very much so. But there are other folks that, do the same thing. And, and like we tell people when, hey, this isn't a fit for us, maybe somebody else can help you. We're happy to forward and refer people along to the other people in the space that we like. So, and that we trust also. So, but in this instance, it was kind of like, all right, well, tell me what you think your name's worth. The number is, crazy, bring it back. We talk about it as a team, and it's like, we can't help you. Right. And then go back. Go ahead.
Just for the specifics, can you give it was like in the millions of dollars, right? Was it like seven figures, what they wanted, or was it low seven figures? I forget the.
Yeah. So, they felt it was a 7-figure domain, and we didn't think that it was that, right? We thought low 6 figures type of thing, and they thought it would be low 7 figures, right? So when you're thinking, okay, it's 10x what we believe this domain is really going, because we also believe, hey, this is what we think we can get for it in this market based on everything that we know about this domain, the potential targets. And this is where you guys and the secret sauce, and a lot of which you've shared in your book, you share on your blogs, you share on the show. You've shared at conferences. It's like, to anybody who listens, we
almost too much. I shared it. We just like, hey, by the way, the book is DomainNameBrokerSecrets.com. It's going to forward you over to my site. At some point, we're going to get this on DomainSherpa and MediaOptions, right, JT?
Oh, dude, yeah. Let's we got the redesign coming up for Domain Sherpa, so we should absolutely make that. Think about that as part of when we do the launch of the new site. We should make sure that we include that with its own page and stuff. But so it's DomainBrokerSecrets.com. Is that the
DomainNameBrokerSecrets.com?
DomainNameBrokerSecrets.com. So and and by the way, the fact that you've written 2 books, is it 2 books now?
2 books, yeah, 2 books.
It's crazy, man. It's crazy.
But
anyway,
let's.
Yeah. I'm not trying to turn this into like an infomercial for your book, but wait, there's more. But
there's value in that book. It took me years to write. This is not like something that just came out of me. I literally go through all the frames that we use, and it's a blueprint to selling your domain, valuing your domain name, stories. Very valuable.
Yep.
I use it.
Yep. And speaking of stories, so in this case, so you've got a seller who thinks their name is worth low 7 figures. We believe this name is worth low 6 figures. And, so then we tell them, hey, look, like, it's just not going to work, And then at that point, they're like, well, wait a minute, maybe I made the mistake. Maybe it's not worth that. Let's talk about it. I'd be happy to cut my number in half. And it's like, well, your number in half is still not what we think this domain is going to garner in today's market, right? Based on everything we've seen. And it's just not a fit for us. We're just not the ones to help you. But I think there was a general feeling of disappointment on the part of the seller because they recognize that we're the best. If their best chance of getting the best price and value for it is us. And so I think it was probably twofold. One, that the domain wasn't really worth what they were hoping it was worth. And two, then, there really wasn't an opportunity to work with us because the expectations were just not in line, right? So it's like, how do you make sure that when you have your opportunity to shoot your shot, right? And I'm not saying with us, like, oh my God, like you lost your chance. Like, it's not that serious with us, but we are selective about who we work with. Or even if you're negotiating with a potential buyer or seller, how do you find that right sweet spot so that you don't miss your opportunity, but also don't leave money on the table?
Yeah, that's really it, right? It's like, if they're doing that to us, right, and they know that we're going to tell them what we think that domain name is worth, what happens when a real buyer comes in, right? And I often say, like, would you even know if you got smacked on the head with a 2x4 what your top offer is for your domain name? Like, you have to know that. And if you don't, you'll end up passing on the best offer for your domain. I've seen it over and over again, where people are like, hey, I got an $8 million offer on this. I was going for 10. Well, actually, it was like a $5 million. I was going for 8. And the buyer told me that's my max. That's all I'm going to go. They walked away from it, and they haven't had an offer since then at that range, right? I mean, the highest offer is like low 6 figures. So you have to know that in order to sell your domain. I have a couple frames to this, right? So the first one is like our domain valuation frame. I call the 3 pillars. There's the buyer types, like who does your domain attracts, who it attracts. And, so often people are out there saying, oh, this, this could be the next, Google, right? And it's like, the chances of that happening are so slim, it's like playing the Mega Lotto, which I'm going to play today because it's $1 billion. Somebody wins, but millions and millions and millions don't win. And so when you're holding out for that, especially with your domain, if you don't understand that, then you're going to pass on your top offer or your best buyer. And it doesn't benefit you because, in some domains, there's one buyer that comes along. I was talking to someone yesterday. They had a .net, and they were saying, hey, Chris, what's the value here? This other company came in and, like a brand protection agency made me an offer. And so we're looking at this, and I was like, okay, first of all, it's a .net. Okay. And I haven't sold a .net I think I've only sold like maybe 2 .nets since I've started in 8 years, right? It's gravitated towards .io, .ai. .ai is the craze now. Actually, I've sold a couple .xyz, it does sell.
Yeah. Go get it, sweat them.
Yeah, .org's picking up with .org is still good. But we're like, hey, there's one buyer for this. Like when we looked at it, we looked at 5 buyer types, right? You can go to any of my blogs, but explain more detail. But it's like at the hobbyist, it's local. That's number one, local and a solo entrepreneur. Then you go to regional, national, and companies. Then you go to Bible, scalable, and then you go to high rev entrepreneurs. There's one buyer, right? And so you have to price that accordingly. Like they're buying this for defensive in nature, and there's a limit to what they would spend, right? And once this buyer walks, listen, there's no one else out there. Like this is it. This is your one chance and one opportunity. If you scare them away with the price that's too high just because you're trying to go for the stars, then they're going to walk.
And I think that's a really good point, right? I mean, I think you have to recognize when, your price is, I'm shooting for the moon, right? Because, and I think if you look, it's almost like the Rick Schwartz model a little bit where, he's the most diamond-handed old school domainer, not the only one, or we even see it with types like anyone who's had a domain that they've, it's taken them 10, 20 years to sell, right? Because they're holding out for the right price, the right time, the right trend. And, and it works for people who it's worked for. I mean, and Rick has been super successful and had some of the biggest sales in history, and he's had that success, which now gives him the luxury of being able to be the most patient person out there. Right. But I think if you're actually trying to sell a name and you're trying to realize the value on it, and you got to strike while the iron's hot, and hoping that it's going to parlay into a lotto ticket is very much exactly like you said. The odds are winning the lottery, right? I mean, it's just
because it's called options. Companies have options. I did a YouTube short today. I was like, you need to create a clear and effortless path for your customer, right? That is your domain strategy. A clear and effortless path. Now, there's two ways you can go. Like when I'm going to Kansas City to visit Matthew, I can take the back way, right? I can go 35 miles an hour, or I can take the highway and go 75, right? So, but at the same point, right? So there's two different ways. Like, yeah, you can kind of get there, right? One, you can go fast. But the same point, companies have options. And once you start elevating the price of that domain name beyond what it's worth, then other options come open. Okay. And those other options are most likely better options depending upon your domain. So we're not saying domains don't have value. There's a lot of value there. 7 figures, 8 figures, 6 figures, 5 figures, 4 figures. It's just, I guess in this first segment, right? It's like, just consider this question. Do you know what how would you know what the top offer is for your domain name? That's the question. Yeah. How would you know? And if someone offered you that, would you know, and would you pass or would you accept it?
Yeah. I know. I think, and so Matthew, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it's important to understand that, there's shooting out of the galaxy as far as your price, but then also there's a difference between that and having your realistic price, but in the higher end of the price bracket. Like if you're looking for a used car in Kelley Blue Book, there's like, great value. There's like basic market value, great value, and like higher end of that market value. And you can stay there and hold out. And, we've seen people who've gone to acquire their domain and the owner understands the worth. They've priced it at the higher end of that spectrum, but it's not out of the galaxy. And, if it's still in that, that price area, then the best buyer for that domain will step up to the plate and take that down.
Not only that, but let's say, further to that point, they'll also be willing to negotiate as long as it's in somewhat of that range, right? Because the thing is, it's like you said, for folks that have other options, and at some point they're just priced out and it just doesn't make any sense, right? If your best buyer for your domain is a company that is funded to the tune of $10 million, well, they're not going to pay $5 million for their domain name, right? And if they, secured $100 million in financing, they're also still probably not paying $5 million for their domain, but they're at least going to be willing to entertain a conversation that will put them in a higher price point than the lower funded business or whatever that's potentially using the domain you have for their brand. And and I think that becomes a really interesting point. So Chris, what would be some of your things as far as like when you talk about domain value to answer that question? How do you make sure that you are pricing your domain properly? So that we're not trying to say, hey, everybody should be fire selling their domains. It's really, because also keep in mind too, as a domain broker, we get paid based off of a percentage of the sales price. So the more a domain sells for, we're perfectly incentivized along with the seller to get the most value for the domains. So again, we're not interested in trying to fire sell a bunch of domains for people. How do you find the sweet spot?
So I would say this, okay, but just a couple points here, and then keep me on topic here, okay? Because I can go off, but. Listen, there's people who've built $1 million businesses, domainers, on selling $3,000 to $5,000 domains. Mm-hmm. They just price them right. They sell them. They rinse, repeat, right? And so there's a very real market for that. Understanding who your buyer is, and then I'm going to go to this opposite extreme, right? Is that why do people buy domains? They buy them because you're basically capturing the wind and the value in that keyword, and you're capturing that everything that's out there, and so. You have like win in your sale in a sense, right? Versus a brandable, like you're having to put that win in the sale, okay? Mm-hmm. And you're having to invest in that. And so let's start. I'll do two things. So I'll start with the 5 buyer types, and then we'll go to the 3 pillars of domain valuation. So the 5 buyer types, The first one is the hobbyist. Okay, they're the person that's drinking beer with their buddies, or like or they're in a I don't know, party, and they're like, oh, I got this great idea for this new business I'm going to do, right? They see the YouTube ad, they're like, I'm going to do that, I'm going to be a coach, I'm going to start a new, supplement line, because they saw this supplement company, and you can literally start a supplement company for like nothing, because you just, privately stick your label on it. I actually did that at one point with Watch Nutrition. Super cool. But those are the pills we take here at MediaOptions. That's why we're all so fired up all the time. We have our own line of man. That was an interesting journey, really cool journey actually down there. But so they'll spend $3,000 to $5,000, right? It's kind of creeping up a little bit, but they'll whip their credit card out. They're drinking at night. They've had too many beers. They'll whip their credit card out, and they buy the domain name because it's a simple path to purchase, right? It's simple. The desire is very short. If you miss that opportunity, they're not going to email you. They're not going to keep coming after you. You got a short window. And once that window's done, then they lose the confidence in what they're building, and they move on to something else. And so you got to make it simple. That's the $3,000 to $5,000 range. Okay.
And the other thing I'd like to say too, and in that price point too, you've also got to think about how you have a lot of other options at that price point. Right?
Oh yeah.
So it's like, you're talking about longer domains, you're talking about names that, have more uses and, more stuff, and, I don't want to say more uses, actually more to the point of like, but you have other options and other alternatives that you could take that someone could go get, even other extensions at that point. I thought it was interesting too, not to get off on that tangent, but the whole thing about the .nets and, and I think that probably is, of a lot of the legacy TLDs, the one that for me is just sort of lost a lot of its sort of hype over the years, where there's still some legacy, and we talk about this on the longer Domain Sherpa shows. Braden Pollock is a .net. I'd say he's a .net. He's gonna be like, I'm not a .net guy, but you do have a few .nets, Braden. You have sold a few, and he would tell you that it's a lot of the mom and pop, brick and mortar kind of old school businesses that can use a .net successfully. But no doubt, like the companies that we deal with, which are a lot of like, early stage startups, funded businesses, things like that, technology businesses, a lot of that crypto, fintech, you name it, health. Interestingly to see them, and now AI, like being willing to, they'd forego a .net as a .com alternative. And although we'll tell you .com is king, you shouldn't really look too often for an alternative unless you have a really good reason for it. But the .ios, even the .xyzs, .orgs have, I kind of look at orgs and nets as, kind of being sort of siblings that were born almost like they're twins. Then you've got the one twin who's like thrived and flourished, and the other twin who's, the other twin who's sorry, Danny DeVito, but then you got the Danny DeVito twin, you know what I'm saying? He's like the .net is Danny DeVito, and, .org is Arnold Schwarzenegger. And it's like, something happened there with.
I remember that movie. Yeah, I remember that.
Anyway, all right. So buyer type, when you're looking at the hobbyist, and obviously it's going to be the kind of thing where if your domain is the type of domain, and if you want to have really quick throughput, obviously the less you're willing to sell it for, the better, as far as time and even for us, we're not really dealing with hobbyists, because at that price point, we're really that doesn't even involve much of what we do as far as our outbound kind of stuff. But okay, so that's the first buyer type.
Yeah, so I'm not going to go the rest of them, because let's do another show just on these, right? So then you go, sure. But my point is that, there's a price range for each of these buyer types, okay? And that's why I thought of these buyer types. I really spent I don't know, a lot of time, like years, thinking about this, trying to dial it in. Who's buying these? I got on to the sites that list pricing, right? I can't. I'm thinking it's. I can't think of it right now. Yeah, name bio. I pulled everything. I pulled years worth of name bio, and I just looked at the different prices that these domains sold at, and I was like, okay, that's it. This is your local entrepreneur. This is your regional. This is your solo entrepreneur, and it just they upgraded when they were scaling, and it just made sense, right? I mean, there was thought behind this. You have to price it according to that buyer type. Who does it attract? And
and I think that's a really good point. And it's like, this pricing exercise took me 2 years and 150 bottles of Zuiker pills to get but I'm with you. I think that's an important thing when people look at their domain and recognize, like, okay, who is actually the buyer for this domain? And if you and if you've got a 3-word, .net versus a oneword.com, I mean, it's obviously going to change that whole process and evaluation, because if you have like, you know, the best internet real estate out there are oneword.com, shorter the better, all this kind of stuff. And, you know, and also depends on who's out there that are utilizing those terms as the brand, and, you know, to recognize like, okay, who is really potentially going to be able to buy my domain. And then based on that, you know, what buyer type do they fit into? And like you said, each buyer type has kind of a range, if you will. And then you know, further look and see like, okay, based off of these potential buyers, what is their financial situation as far as what they're going to be able to do to be able to even afford what I want to get for my domain.
Or what is the true ROI for them, right? And so go ahead.
And even in those like buyer type brackets, you also have to understand and realize, you know, maybe you've got one or two buyer type like buyers in that zone, or maybe you've got one, or maybe you've got five. Like you have to understand that based on what the domain is, you know, it's either going to have more or less. Like we've seen people with unrealistic expectations of, oh, we're going to get like the top 5 billionaires after this domain. You're like, probably not.
Yeah, well, I think that's a very good point. No, and that's part of the I think the analysis that some go through, and they think, oh, okay, you know, somebody might,
like it could be like like in that top tier of like, you know, the top companies going after that domain, but realizing that, you know, that's a completely different space. Just because it fits in that bracket doesn't mean that everybody in that bracket is going to want to go after that. Like it's even more niche down.
Especially when you think about it, you know, top companies have a lot of their own domains already, right? So, you know, you need to kind of hit the right time trend and things for like, you know, to be like, okay, I have threads.com at the time when, you know, Meta is about to release a new service and they decide to name it that, you know, and part of their exercise is evaluating to see what domains are available and at what price, right? So it's like, hey, you know, if this domain is being in a company like Meta, sure, they can pay $20 million for a domain. Doesn't mean that they will. And if they say, hey, I can get threads for 20 million, or I can get threads for, you know, 5 million, I can get topics or some other, you know, .com for 20 million or something, you know, those are the types of things too, where it's like, you think, okay, just because they have the money, they're going to be willing to spend it, when there are other options. It starts to be the kind of thing too, to recognize like there are other options at certain price points that can, you know, well, companies, we deal with some really big entrepreneurs who've created multi-billion-dollar businesses and crazy exits, like all this kind of stuff. And we've also gone through exercises where they've started their next journey, right? And what they do as part of their process is also when, hey, we're trying to figure out what we're going to call my next big thing. And they'll go through a whole thing about what domains are available. And then for the domains that they like, it's like, okay, what are the costs? And then they'll also do some other, you know, due diligence around other alternatives. Yeah. Well, and the trademark piece too.
So
another thing
just to kind of keep this in my mind wrapped to that, this were how we started, right? They reached out to you, it was too high. We're like, okay, it's not worth that. And the momentum was gone with it, right? It wasn't working. And you have to have that expectation. So you need to understand when you're negotiating a domain name, like here's a trend that I see that happens is that you reach out and, you know, let's say this domain's been dormant, it's been locked away for a while, we're starting a broker, you reach out, and the first thing is like, oh, wow, this domain's available, right? What's the price, right? And they come out strong, they're like, okay, what's this price? If it's priced too high, okay, let's say it's even priced the value that we think it should be at. Like they, what can happen is that they can get, and I forget the word I use for this, I don't know why my brain's not working today, but they get comfortable in their pain. And so, yes, at first, like shocked, oh, wow, I need this. I need this. They get comfortable in the pain. And the longer that lasts, sometimes they just dig into something that is actually harmful to them. Okay. And so there's a process to sell this. Is a process I call it worldview sell-through roadmap. It's the process of breaking the worldview, showing that your domain name is important. So I wrote the book, Domain Name Broker Secrets, to educate them, give them a way to look at the ROI, give them the self-view of other founders that have done this. But when you set that too high, what happens? They just double down, and they just, you know, depend upon the size of the company who you're dealing with. Is it, you know, the Bible and Scale are the best ones to deal with because the founders are there, right? As you get the bigger company, they just don't have like a VP of marketing. Listen, they may be on the firing block. Who knows, right? You don't know what's going on in their head, and they're just like, okay, I'm done.
Well, and I think you're right. I think, and that's why it's, again, and the whole purpose of this was kind of to provide a little bit of some sort of anecdotal, call it, context around, if you're pricing your names too high, it's obviously going to make it harder to sell them, period. Right. So, but at the same time, you don't want to leave money on the table. So how do you find that viable sort of point where it's like, look, most domain sellers need to have patience. Like, you're not going to buy a name and then sell it, within 30 days and make 10 extra money. Like, that is just very rare. So you've got to have a certain amount of patience and be able to at least have enough, fortitude, if you will, to hang on through the low ball offers that you're going to get. I mean, we talk about that too. And when we're on the acquisition side, and folks are like, okay, what should we offer? Right. Now, in this case, we're kind of sort of on the other side of the fence talking about, all right, how do you shake a domain loose from a seller, right? That, doesn't want to particularly sell, that might have that willingness to sit on a domain for a while. And it's like, well, you have to recognize that the good names get offers almost daily, even if they're just bullshit spam bot type, hey, let me get, and understanding what that level of sort of daily activity looks like, because then that helps to say, so that number isn't going to get anyone's attention. That's going to get ignored, like all the other spam that they get is going to get ignored. So it's a matter of finding the right spot to say, hey, look, like, we've only got a certain budget, but, we really want to make a serious run at this name, trying to find the right, intro point in order to really start a real conversation and a real negotiation. And on the sell side, it's very much the same thing, just a bit reversed, where it's like, you want to make sure that your number is not so, unless you don't really care, but people are reaching out to us because they want us to sell the name. They want to sell the name. Yeah. So if you want to sell it, great. We don't want you to not get the right value for it, but you need to make sure that you put it in a place that it's not going to turn off all of the potential buyers. And you need to have a sense of who those potential buyers are. And this ties all back to the whole point of what we're saying on the show, which is you need to have a sense of who those buyers are and what those buyer types are like, because then that will help anchor you realistically into what a price, range should be for the domain. So and then there's a whole other thing about making contact, finding the right people, having to negotiate, I mean, that's the whole other, but let's not even go into all that. Like,
topics for the Sherpa bites.
Topics.
Let's put a pin on it. We'll discuss more next episode.
Yeah, I love it. So, all right, cool, man. Well, no, this was good. I appreciate you guys taking the time. I mean, hopefully this is helpful. Again, y'all, we're going to try to, knock some of these out and put them out there. So if you've got questions, specific things, and, we're more open than ever to look at the questions you're asking and see if we can't provide some insight and helpful information, because that's what we do here on Domain Sherpa, where all roads lead to domain. So Matthew, Chris, thank you so much, man. Appreciate you guys. You guys are the best. And, I'm very appreciative of your time and your insight. And I hope the audience is as well. To the audience, as I say in every show, without you, there's no us. So thank you so much for tuning in. And, we're not hard to find if you've got any further questions or clarification, and we'll take it from there. Otherwise, we'll see you here next time on Domain Sherpa, where all roads lead to domains. Peace out, everybody.